Hi, welcome back. It's been a while since I've done a video. Apologies. I'm doing a video today because I've had lots of people email me, contact me through some videos, and something happened today which I think will help me explain something that I've had quite a few questions about recently. Let me explain. RAW versus JPEG. I've had lots of queries, lots of comments over the last few weeks regarding why shoot in RAW? Does it matter? And a lot of people seem to shoot in RAW. I lie. A lot of people seem to shoot in JPEG, sorry. I shoot in RAW. I'm a wedding photographer and I simply have to do too much editing to too many photos to use JPEGs. I'm going to show you in a moment why shooting in RAW is so important and what it allows you to do. That's coming in a second. Let me explain what happened just now. I was out making a cup of coffee in the kitchen and we've got some bird feeders just outside the kitchen window, and look round and there's a squirrel helping himself to the peanut butter on the bird feeder, and it was a very attractive looking squirrel. I thought, run in here, got my camera, went back to the kitchen, got some shots of the squirrel helping himself to our peanut butter. The longest lens I've got is an 85 1.4 lens, and therefore the squirrel was pretty small in the frame. I really needed a 70 to 200, but I don't use that for weddings. I don't have one. I don't normally shoot wildlife. But what I've been able to do is go into Lightroom and create a pretty nice looking photo from what was a very, very ordinary looking photo. And that is why shooting in RAW is so important. And I wouldn't have been able to do what I've done with the shot I got had I only been shooting in JPEG. So we'll nip into Lightroom. I'll show you the before shot and the after shot, and then I'll take you through all the steps I did to get from the before to the after. I hope you find it useful. It's not complicated, don't worry. I do occasionally use Photoshop, and I watch these videos on Photoshop, and after like 30 seconds I'm completely switched off. You know, the guy starts talking about you press Control and this letter and then you do something else and you press Control something else, and it's just so complicated. This is not complicated. If I can do it, it's not complicated, and it will allow you to take your photography to the next level. I look at photography these days as something different to what it used to be when we had film. Back in the days of film, you took a photo and that pretty much was what you got, unless you were willing to spend a lot of money and a lot of time in having your own darkroom, your own equipment. And of course, once colour came along, it all got horribly complicated, and I certainly didn't get involved in that. So it meant you just sent the film off, got back whatever you got, and that was the photo. Photography now is much more about, I see it as collecting data. I'm taking a photo, but it is literally data. It's the raw material that I can then use in Lightroom, very rarely Photoshop, almost exclusively Lightroom, to take that image and turn it into, from the sort of raw material into the finished product. Because that's what's expected. That's the quality and the standard of photography that is now expected. Let's take a look. Okay, so here we are in Lightroom. Now let me just say briefly about Lightroom. You don't have to buy the program. This is Lightroom Classic. You can, if you like, rent it on a monthly basis from Adobe. I think I pay about £9 a month for this, for Photoshop, and 2 or 3 other things. So it's really not a huge cost these days. And of course they keep updating it, and it's, I couldn't live without it. Anyway, so this is the photo I took straight out of camera. You can see I've just got the 2 here. So this is the before, and I'll show you the after in a second. In fact, let me show you the after now as a proper photo. So there's the after, and that came from this shot here. So let me take you, well, let me ask you first, which shot do you prefer? Okay, you might say, well, all I need to do is crop this and we'll have this, you know, a similar sort of picture. So let's do that. Let's just apply a crop. Something like, as you can see, this is a heck of a big crop here. So we're ending up with about going from 24 megapixel to probably, this is probably only about 6 megapixels. But if we do 100% zoom in, this is the advantage of having a fabulous lens like the 85 1.4G lens. You can see we've still got every single hair and reflection in his eye and everything absolutely perfect. So it's, even though it's a huge crop, it's still a really good quality photo. So that's one thing we could do, and certainly you wouldn't need Lightroom to do that. But would you prefer that shot or would you prefer this shot? It's up to you. Maybe you don't like this, but it just shows you, gives you some idea of what we can do with Lightroom fairly quickly. It doesn't take an awful long time, and as you saw here, it does actually look even better once it's exported, because what we're looking at in Lightroom is a smart preview rather than the finished photo. So let's take a look at what I did to get from this to that finished article. And one of the great new features of Lightroom is subject select. You can select the subject. So we create a mask and we say select subject, and Lightroom will go off and it looks, I think it looks for the things that are most in focus, because what I think, because the squirrel and this post is in the same focal plane, I'm suspecting they're both going to come up as being the subject. Anything that's not sharply in focus won't be highlighted, won't be selected as a subject. So if I do show overlay, yes, exactly. So because I'm shooting at 2.5 rather than 1.4, I've got a slightly larger depth of field, and it's picked up the post and the other stuff. But what we can do obviously is we can amend that. We can subtract from that mask because we don't want the post here. By the way, let me just explain what I'm trying to achieve so that you know where I'm heading. What I want to do is isolate, is to be able to select the background, just the background. I can then do things to the background which won't have any effect at all on my friendly squirrel here. So I can create this look, I can change the colour, I can make it more blurred, and then I can make the squirrel stand out even more. By separating the two things, it just allows us to do lots of stuff. I'm then going to get rid of this, which is a little bit distracting, and change the colour of the background, that kind of thing. So what I'm first trying to do is just get the squirrel on his own. So we'll select that. I'm going to subtract using a brush. So using a brush, I can just paint over all the things that I don't want to be regarded as being a squirrel. Doesn't exactly take a huge amount of time. Right, we'll just get rid of a little bit more of the stick, I think. Now, if I zoom in, you'll see that his ear hasn't actually been picked up. So we can add, again, using a brush, to that selection, and this will now make his ear, as you would hope, part of the subject. Going to get really small. I'm doing this much quicker than I would normally. That last one didn't work. Okay, we'll call that it. So we now have, as you can see, just the squirrel. What I now want to do the way to do this is to make a duplicate of this mask. Okay, so we've now got a copy of that mask somewhere. There we go. And if I hit that, so I can go to the copy, I can go to the subject, I can go across to here, do right click, and I can invert. Now that then shows the background, but because we erased some of that, it needs to be, sorry, why isn't that showing up? It should show that one. There we go. So I now want to add to that again with a brush. It's a bit of a faff, but in reality it only takes literally a couple of minutes to do this, and this isn't something I would do on every wedding photo, of course. Okay, so there we have the background completely separate from the squirrel. What we now do is we come down to the mask here, and I'm just going to choose darken, and we'll take the overlay off. So if I now drop the exposure, it's just going to drop the exposure on the background and it won't affect our squirrel at all. What I can also do, and what I did for that picture for the finished article, was to reduce the texture, reduce the clarity and the sharpness, so that it all falls into just a mush of colour in the background. Maybe a bit of dehaze, and then go and make it even darker, something like that. Okay, we can now change the colour slightly. You can't do the same amount that on this that you can do in Photoshop, but if we choose the colour picker here and choose a colour, this will now tint the background. I won't say it will completely change it. It will do a pretty dramatic if you really want to. I think it was slightly sort of pinky. Let's go for that. So let's go for whatever colour you think looks reasonable. Okay, let's do that. We'll call that it, so we'll click done. But the whole image wants to be a bit brighter, so we'll just simply, well, we can brighten up the whole image, or what I would do, what you can do, as you've now got the squirrel just on his own, you can actually, of course, increase the exposure, saturation, and I think I'll be happy with him. I think that's kind of a bird feeder thing there. So the way to do that, let's go in a little bit on the zoom. What I'm going to use is the spot removal tool. Now this isn't as good as the lasso and background replacement tool in Photoshop, but it does, on backgrounds it works particularly well. If you want to remove a car when you've shot something at f10 and it's pretty well in focus, then that's not going to be so good. But when you've got a nice background like this that's all wishy-washy and well, you'll see it's really not too difficult. Now for some reason Lightroom decides it wants to look similar to the background, and don't try and do it in one go. Pick lots of, by the way, I'm using clone here. You've got clone or heal. Heal will let the background, the thing you're trying to cover up, show through a little bit. It'll keep the texture of whatever it is you're trying to cover up. I don't want that. I want to get rid of the thing completely, so I'm using clone. So I've just got a little bit there that I need to get rid of, so we'll just get rid of that one, and then I think we're done. So we've now completely obliterated that box with something that looks pretty realistic actually. What I'll then do is just add another mask. This time we're just going to use a linear and it's going to be darken, and I just want to darken this edge somewhat. Something like that. Okay, so let's now look at the before. Of course, it hasn't taken the crop into account, but the before and the after. And that's the sort of level of creativity that Lightroom enables you to have. And here's the one that I came up with earlier, which I have to say, I think I prefer the colours of that, but you get the idea. And that is why shooting in RAW is, for me, just an absolute must do. You cannot shoot in JPEG. You could not do what I've just done here using JPEG files. There just isn't enough information and data in the files to keep this sort of level of detail from the shot. I hope you agree that's a stunning amount of detail in that, thanks to the lens, but also transformed from a normal sort of photograph into something much more artistic. I think. I've got this modeler shoot on Monday, which is only 4 days away now. So I'm going to do some behind the scenes video of that. We'll do some processing. We'll look at some of the shots from that. We'll look at some of the lighting. And again, I hope you found that useful. Thanks very much for watching.